There we are.
Stated Clearly presents, what exactly is a gene?
Okay, so you guys should actually know this at this point. Tell your partner, what is a gene? Okay, we're going to find out what they define a gene as. Looking up at the screen again. You're trying to focus? Would you like to do that in the back room so it's quiet? Oh, for an eraser. Here.
Each one of our cells contains 46 strands of DNA.
46 strands of DNA. What do we call those? A chromosome. So we have 46 chromosomes.
A single strand is made of millions of particles called nucleotides, and these nucleotides come in 4 different types, which scientists have labeled A, C, T, and G. A gene is a special stretch of DNA, a sequence of A's, C's, T's, and G's that code for something. A gene contains information for a cell to read and use, but what exactly does that information do? You might have heard that there's a blue-eyed gene, a freckled gene, possibly even an anger gene, but single genes don't literally make things like eyeballs or freckles or temper tantrums. Genes make proteins. Those proteins then interact with each other and all sorts of chemicals inside the body to build things like eye pigments, freckles, and mood-altering hormones. A single strand of DNA contains thousands of genes or unique protein recipes. Humans have roughly 20,000 altogether. Some genes are small, only about 300 letters long. Others are well over 1 million. The length and sequence of a gene determine the size and shape of the protein it builds. The size and shape of the protein determine the function that protein will have inside the body. Hemoglobin, for example, is a protein structure found in red blood cells.
Watch this one for the animation. Remember, you don't have to write it on everything. We're going to be writing it down together later, so don't desperately just focus on watching it and absorbing, and then we'll write everything down later. This is well worth watching the little animation because it's interesting. Okay, so make sure you watch this little animation of how hemoglobin, have you heard of hemoglobin? It's what's in your red blood cells that allows it to grab onto the oxygen, and then it will release the oxygen when it comes to the tissues in your body. So in your lungs, it grabs onto the oxygen. When it gets to other parts of your body, it'll release the oxygen so they can use it to burn the fuel.
Its unique shape and size allow it to capture oxygen molecules when blood flows near the lungs, and then release them later when blood flows near oxygen-starved tissues.
If you missed that little animation, I'm going to show it one more time. Here comes the oxygen. Watch it capture the oxygen.
Allow it to capture oxygen molecules when blood flows near the lungs, and then release them later when blood flows near oxygen-starved tissues. Pepsin is a digestive protein. Its unique shape allows it to break down food inside your stomach so it can be absorbed by the body.
Pepsin is an enzyme.
Keratin is a structural protein. Its unique shape and size allow it to link together with other keratin proteins to form hard structures like fingernails, claws, and beaks. Different creatures have different genes, which is ultimately why their bodies look and function differently. But one of the many reasons scientists believe all life on Earth is related is that the basic DNA code, the language of A's, C's, T's, and G's, is pretty much the same for all living things. Many creatures even share some of the same genes. You might not be too surprised to learn that humans and chimps, which are closely related,
How much DNA do you think we share in common? Like, sorry? 99%. Any other guesses? Yes? 50? Any other guesses? All right, let's find out.
Share 96% of their genetic code. But what would you think a lowly fruit fly has in common with a beautiful swimsuit model?
How much of the genetic code do we share in common with a fruit fly? Any guesses? 70? 2? 99%. You're sticking with that number, are you? We have more in common with a fruit fly than with a chimp? Okay.
Surprisingly, about half of its genes. Because all creatures use
It's because all of the things like burning fuel and digesting foods and things like that use all the same proteins. That's why a lot of the genetic code is the same, because a lot of the proteins are the same for basic cellular processes.
DNA in pretty much the same way. Genetic engineers have found that if they take a gene from, say, a bacteria cell and insert it into the DNA of an animal or a plant cell, that animal or plant cell will then read the new gene and produce the bacterial protein. Engineers have mixed and matched the genes of different organisms to produce many new creatures, including corn that is toxic to insects but supposedly safe for human consumption, tomatoes that last up to twice as long in the grocery store before going bad, and a new form of bacteria that produce the human protein insulin, which we then collect from these bacteria and give to people with diabetes who need extra insulin to survive. So just to sum things up a bit, what exactly is a gene? A gene is a special stretch of DNA, not the entire strand of DNA, just a segment that codes for something. Each gene is like a unique recipe, which usually tells a cell how to make a protein or a group of proteins. Different creatures have different genes, but all genes are written in the same basic DNA language of A's, C's, T's, and G's. I'm John Perry, and that's genes stated clearly.
Okay. So let's go through here and see what we can fill in. Each one of our genes contains how many strands of DNA? How many? 46. Why is my pen not working? There we go. 46. A single strand is made of millions of particles called nucleotides. These are our nucleotides. And the nucleotides are A, C, T, and G. A gene is a special stretch of DNA, a sequence of A's, C's, T's, and G's that codes for something. What does it code for? A gene codes for a protein. You might have heard that there's a blue-eye gene, a freckle gene, or possibly even an anger gene, but single genes don't literally make things like eyeballs or freckles or temper tantrums. Genes make proteins. These proteins then interact with each other and all sorts of other chemicals inside the body to build things like eye pigments. What is a pigment again? It's a coloring. Yeah, a color. I forget what the next one is. Is it enzymes? Freckles. Excellent. Freckles. And mood altering hormones. A single strand of DNA contains, is it thousands? Excellent. I should have my answer key in front of me, but I don't. Thousands of genes or protein building instructions or recipes. Humans have roughly 20,000. I guess I had room for the word there. 20,000 genes altogether. Some genes are small, only 300 letters long, whereas others are over 1,000,000. So you got large genes and small genes. If you have a small gene, you're going to get a small protein. If you have a large gene, you're going to get a large protein. The length and sequence of a gene determine the size and shape of the protein it builds. The size and shape of the protein determines the function. That little fix is just for me because I don't know why there's 2 lines there when we only needed 1. Hemoglobin, for example, is a protein found in red blood cells. Its unique shape and size allow it to capture, and if you don't like the word capture, you could use the word grab, oxygen molecules. So look at those little oxygen molecules. Here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4. They come in and the protein grabs them. So now they've been grabbed. Do you see how the protein actually kind of folds on itself and goes chop? And it grabs the oxygens? And then it releases them when blood flows near the oxygen-starved tissues. Question?
Yes, I have a question. We're actually already going to get some.
Okay. Pepsin is a digestive protein. Its unique shape allows it to break down food inside your stomach so it can be absorbed by the body. Pepsin is an enzyme. It speeds up the breakdown of food. What type of protein is keratin? Structural. Yeah, it's part of your hair, it's part of your nails. Yeah. Its unique shape and size allow it to link together with other keratin proteins to form hard structures like fingernails, claws, and beaks, also hair. Different creatures have different genes, which is ultimately why their bodies look and function differently. But all creatures, all animals have the gene to make keratin because they all have some sort of nails or beaks or hairs or fur or something like that that uses keratin as part of its structure. Different genes, different creatures have different genes, which is why they ultimately look and function differently. And it's also because different organisms turn on and off different genes. Anyone remember how much we share with a chimp? 96. And with a fruit fly? 50. What do we call all of our genetic information? That's our genetic code. And these guys share about 50% of its genes. Because all creatures use DNA in pretty much the same way, genetic engineers have found that they can take the gene from, say, a bacteria cell and insert it into the DNA of a plant or animal cell. That animal or plant cell will read the gene. This makes it sound so much easier than it is. In reality, getting the gene in there is not the hard part. It's actually getting it to turn on that gene and actually read it and make the protein. But we'll pretend it's just that easy. The animal or plant cell will read the gene and produce the bacterial protein. Engineers have mixed and matched genes of many different organisms to produce many new creatures. In other words, genetically modified organisms. Have you guys heard of GMOs? Yeah, that's what it stands for, genetically modified organisms, including corn that is toxic to insects, but supposedly safe for human consumption. They have genetically engineered tomatoes that last up to 5 times as long at the grocery store. So here is our modified tomato before, after 5 weeks, or, after 10 days or whatever. Here's our normal tomato. After, you can see it has shrunk down and shriveled and whatever. So although it might be nice to always say, oh yeah, we're going to have no GMOs, you go to the grocery store, it's nice to have a tomato that looks like fresh. Just depends on, that's why they very often encourage people to buy local, because then you have less need of genetically modified stuff. You can just have things that are fresh because they are literally fresh, not because they've had genetic modification to them. Now, the next one is really, really useful. They used to have to get insulin from, I believe it was horses, but I could be wrong. Horses. If you had diabetes. But now they can actually take a bacteria that produces the human protein, hormone, insulin. And we can collect it from these bacteria. We can just have these bacteria will grow, they will produce insulin, and you can isolate it from, like, you just have this sort of a flask, and in that flask there's bacteria growing, and you just swirl it around with some nutrients and at the right temperature, and then you can collect the insulin afterwards. And no horses were harmed in the making of this insulin. Okay? And then we collect it from the bacteria and give it to people with, who needs insulin? Diabetics, people with diabetes, who need extra insulin to survive. Insulin is a hormone that helps move sugar. Here's your cell. Here's your capillary. You guys know what a capillary is? Mini blood vessel. And in there, we have sugar molecules. And we want the sugar to get into the cell because the sugar is fuel and insulin allows that to happen. If you don't have the insulin, the sugar just stays in the blood. Okay. Summary: a gene is a special stretch of DNA, not an entire strand, just a segment that codes for something. What does it code for? A protein. Each gene is a unique recipe that tells a cell how to make a protein. I'm going to put this in brackets or a group of proteins because that's more complicated than we need in grade 9. Okay. Basically, a gene is the recipe to make a protein. Different creatures have different genes, but all are written in the same basic DNA language of A's, C's, T's, and G's. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to do page 65, 85, because I can't read. You're going to do page 85 and you're going to add that onto your cheat sheet. So I'll give you about 10 minutes to work on that. And then we're going to do a little bit more on genes, and then I'm going to give you some time to finish up your RNA cheat sheet if you need to, and work on some other stuff if you have already done that. So that's going to be until about 1:05. Well, I mean, you've got 10 minutes to work on the genes, but probably will be able to finish it. Yes. Monomer is the biological. Something that is sort of more. What can I do for you, Anthony? Yes, certainly.
I think you feel better than all of us. Yeah. Wish your lives. I'm wrong. Wait, Schwartz?
Okay.
I would say it's more about selling like. People see what I'm shopping for. They must come back. They definitely. Feels lost, telling you. I'll show you this. It's not really related. Yeah. Okay. It's not just place. Yeah. I would say that. Wow. So this is also. Yeah.
Did I finish the cheat sheet?
Uh,
Yes. Well, here, you know what? You can take the book and go find things. There you go. No, I've just got one for Mateo, yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Oh, you did. I didn't know you were trying to it now. You're involved, you just like, it's not really about you. You will not be. Long. So you know, just like, fix. Like, really long. I love you to get a lot of life experience. Things we like. I was okay, so what's the longest statement about that? The guy who wants. No, throw it away. I'll take it. What? Do you want? Do you want? I don't know how long. You're so good. I don't think I want. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, you got it. No, you got that. You don't need to go this. You can keep that. You don't want to go. No. Yeah, like it shouldn't play. It's like it's commonly used in like a Ah, okay, you have to do that. No, not at all. Yo, why did you say? Oh, hopefully, fingers crossed. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, your attention in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There will be more time to work on this in the class, don't worry, but we're going to go to page 86 for now and just take a look at some pictures that will help us see what a gene kind of looks like on the chromosome itself. So what is a gene? It's a small segment of DNA, and it is always located at a specific place on a chromosome. So if you have a chromosome that's all coiled up, this is a coiled up chromosome. What's that word that we use that means to coil up? Condense, yes. So this is a condensed chromosome. What is happening? Oh, well. Okay, anyway, we have a condensed chromosome. And on that condensed chromosome, we have an eye color gene. That is really distracting. I have to go see.
All right. I can say it now. I can say it right.
They're sticking pencils to the wall, but they're going to use a different wall now. Okay.
Was it
Huh? No. Okay, so we're going to, whenever you have this chromosome, the eye colored gene will always be at the same location. And if you've got a hair color gene on that same chromosome, it will always be at the same location. Now, hitchhiker's thumb, this is one that you can actually look out and find out whether you have the hitchhiker's thumb trait or not. If you have a hitchhiker's thumb, your thumb will bend backwards. If you do not have hitchhiker's thumb, then your thumb will not bend backwards. And this is something you're going to look at next year. This is called the dominant trait. So if you get one copy of this gene, your thumb will bend backwards. If you have to get 2 copies of non-hitchhiker's thumb for your thumb to not bend backwards. Yeah, that's a slight hitchhiker's thumb. Yeah, like people who can't really can't. It just goes straight. Yeah, like that's pretty straight. Okay. Your earlobe. Here's another one that you can check out. The earlobe gene, either your earlobe if this is a person's head, you can either have an earlobe that is attached Or you can have it where it is unattached. So there's kind of like an actual like little whoop, and you might not even know yourself. You might have to ask your friend to look at you and say, am I attached? Does it just kind of go straight in, or do I have like a little... So you can tell whether you have a dominant gene or whether you have two recessive genes. There's also a hairy knuckle gene. To look at this one, to look at whether you have hairy knuckles or not, it doesn't mean this one, not your first joint, but the second joint. If there's hair there, you have hairy knuckles. If there's no hair, you don't have hairy knuckles. Everybody usually has hair on this one, but not necessarily on this one. And this is kind of weird because I have always had hair here, but as I've gotten older, I have less. So obviously that's also linked to hormones and things like that. Why might you go from having a chromosome which is uncopied Why would you go from having an unreplicated chromosome to having a replicated chromosome? Why would you bother making an identical copy of a chromosome? So what? That's a very good thought. Okay. The reason that we make a copy, and it is an identical copy. Okay, these are identical copies. They're identical copies, and the cell makes those identical copies before it splits into two new cells. And it makes two identical copies so that each new cell, if you've got one cell and it's got two identical copies, one of them's going to go to this cell and one of them's going to go to that cell, and it pinches off, and each new cell gets a copy of all the genetic information. This replication happens before cell division. So it goes from uncopied to copied. Happens before cell division. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have chromosome like this. with two identical copies, and they're going to split apart. So what's going to happen is you're going to have this one goes this way, and this one goes this way. They get pulled to the sides. And then the cell splits in two. Each new cell gets a copy of the chromosome. If you didn't copy it first, would each new cell get a copy? No. So there's a picture of our chromosome. There's a picture of the gene right there. And then the gene is here. And then if we blow it up even further, you can see it is a sequence of DNA nucleotides. So this is a chromosome. This whole bit here is DNA, and a single segment of that is a gene, and the gene codes for the protein. Each gene stores information needed to produce one of the 90,000 to 100,000 different proteins needed. The arrangement of bases in a gene will be used to produce a specific protein. Every chromosome contains thousands of genes and therefore contains the information to make thousands of different proteins. And just a reminder, what do proteins do? They honestly do just about everything. Need to speed up a chemical reaction? Who are you going to get to do it? A protein. What do we call those proteins? Enzymes. Do you need some color in the skin or the eyes? Who are you going to get to do that? Pigments. Do you need some oxygen moved around the body? Who's going to do that for you? Hemoglobin. Do you need your muscles to contract? Who are you going to get to do it? A protein, and those proteins are called actin and myosin, but do you care that they're called actin and myosin? Not really. Hemoglobin is a transport protein. It moves things around the body. Actin and myosin are called contractile proteins because if you move your muscle, it contracts. Do you need to turn a gene on in a cell? Get a protein to do it. In this case, it's a signaling protein. Need to get a message around the body? Get a hormone to do it. Need to make some hair, skin, nails, muscles, cartilage, tendons, or ligaments? Get a structural protein. Need to fight off an infection? Who's going to do that? Antibodies. All right. There's just a little picture. 3 specific types of proteins. There's your structural proteins. You are not responsible for knowing the words collagen and keratin and those things. You're not responsible for knowing particular protein names.
I don't know.
Okay, so if you did not finish page 85, you can work on page 85. If you did finish it, you can work on 91. You might need to do a little reading. And you can work on your cheat sheet. Tomorrow there are quizzes on pages 52 to 77. I'm not interested in that. You can deal with it after class.
Okay, all my life I didn't like it. I really I stayed all my life. Exactly. So I was calling this bad. And usually I see this bad. I know you on my life, I didn't take my on my life. Like in my head, like all my life, I didn't take on both days, on both days. You would be a perfect student. I don't know. I swear I'm not yet. I'm watching show. I'm like, okay, so I didn't know. I'm going up to speak here. I'm tired. Oh, I know what you have your water bottle. I mean, there was a lot of data about nuclear, but again, I would rather argue with all that other things. It doesn't even look. I don't really. Okay, listen, I think I. And then it's like. I don't have to do with water bottle. No, that lost your water bottle. That's my line. He's on. I mean, not if you want to jump. Yeah, you go on the ground. Okay, sorry. I feel smaller. Like, even I saw the line. Okay, yeah, I will. Okay. Yeah. That's no longer. Yeah, there you go. Oh. There you go.
Slot a guy.
The story of that one, right? We all flat about this role.
It's okay.
It was, yeah, it was. Like bad. Oh yeah, I think yeah. I was like so. Doesn't matter. That's honestly something. You can buy. Yeah, you do. How about Lucas? Way. Lucas, I love that game. Lucas, I have like even like I have been like roasted for ever since I watched my play, no matter how good it was. Like that. I really told them, oh yeah, I yes. They're like they did the roast that on the game. If I immediately flash out like something like I shit area. I give you ass. Oh, I don't want to. He said he doesn't want. Yeah. He said he doesn't want. I'm not making mistakes where you. I don't think so. How do you know? I don't Say sorry. Say sorry. Yeah, you will still with history right now. Yeah, you can see that. Please be able to. I'm texting what you want. Yeah, I think those Kyle too. I would want to know, no matter what hands back, you know, I don't think I heard it. Yeah, I agree. Something like that. Oh, yes. Oh, I can. Wait, yeah. I'm in doubt.
I'll agree. I'll agree.
My mind. Is. Yes.
Sometimes I'll be conscious out like not that strong. Like I feel bad. They just all the thing not too fast.
I need you guys to think.
I guess he fights back.
You don't. It was one of those.
Oh wait, I don't know.
I don't want to do that.
Like the actual one, maybe like draw store. It's like
So like you're just
like honestly, I'm not.
I
He's relatively scarred one.
It's still like.
I didn't take that. I want to do that. And shit like.
Oh yeah, you're right. You got shit.
If we were actually like the boss actually he would be dead right now. I'll take